Hello and welcome to Transformations Cafe, where we're serving light as bold as love. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Transformations Cafe is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation, or IFGT. We're a nonprofit, all volunteer organization, and our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformations in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about positive change in the world individually and collectively. We invite you to learn more about IFGT at our website, which you can find at theglobaltransformation.org. If you'd like to join us, we have membership options, and you can click the join button you can find on every page on our site. And if you'd like to support us, there's also a donate button on each page that will take you straight through to PayPal. We do have several people joining us in a live audience today, and we're recording the program. It will be featured and published on our YouTube channel. And for those of you with us today, first of all, thank you. And also, if you decide to participate in the conversation, which is one of the things we feature on this program, we'll accept your participation as your implied consent that you're willing to appear in the publication on YouTube. We invite you and everyone to subscribe to our channel and click that little bell icon to be notified when we do post new material on YouTube. On today's program, we're going to continue several conversations that we've been having on the Ageless Wisdom. And today's topic, we're really going to focus very much on our spiritual paths and our true nature as eternal souls. I wanted to take the time also just to remind our audiences that IFGT does not promote any specific philosophy, teachings, or teacher, or any single form of the Ageless Wisdom. We know there are many forms of the wisdom, and that's what helps communicate the wisdom to people across various time and locations, and hence a saying that my teacher likes to use, which is the wisdom is the wisdom. So there may be differences in what we discussed today from what you may have come across in other forms of the wisdom you're familiar with, but the major aspects of the wisdom you will find in any presentation. So just wanted to give that little caveat. And so with that, I want to also introduce our guests who we're very pleased and honored to have with us today, Dimitri Moraitis. We will be discussing one of the many books that he co-authored with Barbara Y. Martin, and that book is titled Heaven and Your Spiritual Evolution, A Mystic's Guide to the Afterlife and Reaching Your Highest Potential. I have a brief bio for Dimitri that I'll read, and then he has a short presentation that he'll start us off with on today's program. Dimitri Moraitis is the co-founder and co-spiritual director of Spiritual Arts Institute, or SAI, in Encinitas, California. You can also find them on the web at spiritualarts.org. An illumined metaphysical teacher, healer, and co-author of numerous books, Dimitri is also the co-creator with Barbara of the SAI programs, course curriculums, and numerous workshops. Dimitri has been instrumental in bringing Spiritual Arts Institute to the place it is today as a premier metaphysical school. An eloquent speaker on a wide variety of spiritual topics, he has lectured across the country, appeared on numerous radio shows, and leads with Barbara the workshops and training classes offered at the Institute. So once again, welcome, Dimitri. It's just a joy to have you here in the cafe, and invite you to start your presentation whenever you'd like.
Okay, well, thank you, Ken, and thank you, Marianne, and appreciate you inviting me here today. And I actually enjoyed very much our pre-discussion, talking about some of the great ones that have come and kind of helped lead the way in the metaphysics. we're such an important crossing point right now. There's a lot of changes going on in the industry, and it's growing, but it's also, I don't want to say splintering, but diversifying more than ever. And that means it's more important than ever to really reach out. And I really liked also what you said about, it wasn't that long ago to study things like this, you had to be in a mystery school or an ashram. And
Yeah.
now that we're kind of talking more openly, yes, there's different slight interpretations, but you are trying to find a common thread. And of course, everything should be tested by you. Anytime you're receiving some knowledge, and knowledge is useless without use, right? So it's not until you really apply it that you start finding, is this really something for you? My own journey began many years ago. I moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in movies and television, and that was actually going well. But I didn't know what metaphysics was at that time. I was having these what I called sort of inspiration moments, and I just thought, these were just beautiful things that happen. And in the arts, you're always kind of, trying to grab that ineffable a little bit, but they got so strong, it led to a very profound spiritual awakening, which definitely changed the course of my life. And it was only a year after that, I was at a dinner party, and this woman led a meditation, and it was sort of like opening this ancient door. And it was Barbara, and I was very careful. I've been doing a lot of studying and internal reflection, but I hadn't joined a group or anything. So I had a lot on my mind, and I kind of really poured my heart out that evening. Barbara said, "Boy, you really interrogated me last night, that first evening." Um, but I realized as I was talking to her, she's talking from her own experiences, and she's giving language to things I didn't even quite understand what was sort of happening. And I knew that night, oh, this is my teacher. She's a generation older than me. And we jumped in the water right away. And we also, though, we both were writers, and I realized, oh, I'm meant to kind of work with her, not just be her student. So, and then it also became clear, from metaphysics, this was meant to be my career, not just a personal, private pursuit. And I wasn't in that world at all, and my friends in the film biz thought I'd lost my mind. Oh, he has spent too much time in California, things like that. But it was not really a choice. I knew I had found the mother lode, and I wasn't going to let that go. And it's been a remarkable journey. This happened it's happened 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And, it's been, now Barbara at this point is not on the public platform anymore, or she'd be joining us tonight. But I do want to say a few words about her. Um,
Please. Yeah.
she was basically born clairvoyant. At 3 years old, she was seeing auras, although I didn't know what they were. I just knew I was attracted to people that had the pretty colors and detracted to those that didn't. I'll just share one quick, very funny story. Her father was a Greek Orthodox priest, and they had 6 kids, and he was also a builder of churches. So the diocese would send him a location, get up the congregation, literally physically build the church, and then they'd move somewhere else. At one point, they were inaugurating, he didn't build this, but I guess he was part of it, a cathedral, and this archbishop was there. And of course, the family, it was prominently there. Barbara's literally 4 years old. She's looking at the aura of the archbishop. He said, I saw all these grotesque colors. It wasn't pretty at all. The
Oh,
bishops had beautiful colors, but not him. And at the end, you're supposed to kiss the hand of the officiating, in this case, archbishop. Little Barbara screams in the middle of the congregation, "Oh, I'm not kissing his hand. He's a monster. He eats children." You
my
know,
God.
and that was one of many spankings. So she learned, you know what? Not everybody's experiencing what I'm experiencing.
Hmm.
At 11 years old, she was part of an acting company, a theater stock company, they called it in those days. And the woman called her in one day privately. She thought, oh, she doesn't like my acting. I'm going to get kicked out. And the woman basically said, you can see the aura, can't you? And her jaw dropped. She said, is that what it's called? She didn't even have a name for it. Says, well, I can see the aura too. I'm a Hermetic scientist. My mother and grandmother are Hermetic scientists. And I would like to teach you a little bit about your gifts. And Barbara said she was reading from these handwritten manuscripts, that were hundreds of years old. And that's where she started to learn about color interpretation. What does this emerald green mean in the aura here? What does the silver mean in the aura in this position? And why are the energies organized the way they are? Because there's an entire anatomy to the aura. It's not just you're a green and I'm a blue.
Mm.
Uh, and so that unlocked interpretation. In her teenage years, she was becoming again, I wasn't trying to do this, it was just happening. She was communicating with the other side, going to the inner planes. All these things were happening. But in high school, she said, I just was trying to live a normal life. I was trying to shut it down, but it wasn't sort of letting me. Her family members were actors and singers, so she started gathering in L.A. She got an acting group together, and they would put on these variety shows, and they had people like Red Skelton and other people that were part of it. And she was going to take this big time, but then the inspiration came in, no, you're meant to be a spiritual teacher, not an entertainer. And so she changed her course direction. Interesting, we were both in the arts, but then changed course. And then she met a mystic in LA that prepared her to be a teacher. She said, you're going to get on a lecture platform and talk about this. Now, again, we're talking like the 50s and early 60s, right? People didn't talk about auras in the public platform at that time. So she was one of the first to really do that, even before the days of Kirlian photography. And while her teacher was taught only very, very privately, Barbara did go on the lecture platform. And when I had met her, she had already been teaching for many years. But she spoke completely inspirationally. There was no books, there was no real written material. And so I realized soon, we have to organize this. We have to put this together. There was literally encyclopedias of notes. Um, and but I didn't realize as we were organizing this, she was also training me to teach and carry on the torch. And that was kind of a shock. I was kind of happy in the role I was in. But I realized I could do it. And again, there was this, we do follow, we call the mystery school lineage of teacher to student to teacher to student. So she's been training me just for teaching for 20 years now. This is not an overnight scenario here. This doesn't happen quickly. There's a lot to learn. And yes, I'm teaching now, but I still consider myself very, very much a student. Um, Now, this last book, the one we're going to talk a little bit tonight, why I'm so excited about it is, our first book, Change Your Aura, Change Your Life, is just a beautiful story about so much of Barbara's experiences and all of that. But it tells the world what we do. We meditate with divine light. But this book, Heaven and Your Spiritual Evolution, tells the world who we are. We're a spiritual growth organization. So all our work, our motto is helping souls grow. It's the evolution of the soul. That's why we're here. We can dabble in different things and want to experiment with, different aspects of metaphysics. But the real purpose of metaphysics is to help in the evolution of the soul. Every person has a potential, a spiritual potential, and we're meant to reach it in this lifetime. They say, do your best to leave the world better than the way you found it. Well, we're also supposed to leave the world at a higher level of consciousness than when we started. When people say, oh, Joe hasn't changed for 50 years. Well, that's not exactly a compliment. you know, I know it shows stability, but you want a dynamic life. Actually, I love Manly Hall's quote, as you get older, don't think of your life as a law of diminishing return. You're going to keep giving to your literal last day on earth. You may retire from a job you did for 30 years, but you're not retiring from life. You're going to be working, hopefully, to its time to pass on. So the book is around that. So that's what I want to share a little bit tonight before we discuss is how do we in our work? Now, I do want to comment one thing. We do work from a tradition. While inspiration's coming in, a lot of this is Barbara's direct inspiration, and she's been training me in my own inspiration, but it follows a lineage. It's not just kind of putting ideas together. Our tradition is it's called the Kingdom of Light teachings, and you can trace it back to the Hebrew mystics almost 4,000 years ago. So it's gone through different incarnations through the ages to accommodate, the times and people that we're in. And now there's a tremendous blossoming in the 21st century. I know when I started with Barbara, she kept saying, no, there's a spiritual renaissance coming. This is just the clarion call of what's going to be happening. And now here we're seeing it. And it's still in the early stages of where it's going to go, in the years and decades ahead. So the book is called Heaven and Your Spiritual Evolution, but in a way we were going to call it, you don't go to heaven, you grow to heaven. So what we're trying to say is evolution is a gradual process. No matter how good a life you live, it's one of, as we may know, many lifetimes. Each is sort of like a grade in school. But we do want to make sure we pass this particular grade. Just a moment about Barbara, again, over 50 years of clairvoyant study, it's really more like 60 at this point. But I do share, she got her first training at age 11, but she wasn't really teaching till almost 40. So there was a long period of adaptation and development so that when she did start, there was already this tremendous wealth of knowledge that she had already accumulated, again, from her own personal experiences. But in our definition of spiritual growth is the gradual process of the soul's evolution through the many inner dimensions of life. So, as I'm sure everyone here knows, the physical world is not the only universe there is. There's a spiritual universe. We call it the other side, the great beyond, whatever name you want to give it. But this other side isn't one dimension. It's many places, right? The Bible says, in my Father's house are many mansions, and I go to prepare a place for you. And these many mansions or dimensions are literal places you can go to, but they're also states of consciousness. So here on our physical earth, it's a little bit of a melting pot, right? You can have, a Mahatma Gandhi physically standing to an Adolf Hitler, even though they're operating at vastly different levels of energy, physically they can be in the same space together. You would not find that so much on the other side. On the other side, you're going to find yourself not with people like yourself, but with people at a similar vibratory rate as yourself. So it's not really reward or punishment. It's like attracting like. So if I have earned 50,000 watts of power through my evolution, I'm going to find myself at a place on the other side corresponding to that, not corresponding to 100,000 or 20,000, but what we've earned. So one of the things, Barb would say always, the most precious thing you possess is your light, because you are going to take that with you. You're not taking your fame, your fortune, but you are taking your light. So spiritual energy is the passport to eternity. Now, the interesting thing is we're not just growing when we're on the other side. We're growing, of course, here. Earth is a school. And we're here through our life experiences, through the things we're learning, whether it's painful or pleasant. The soul is absorbing these experiences and going through the gentle process of evolution. So right now, those of us sitting in the room, in this space together right now, our auras right now are literally vibrating to an energy level corresponding to a spiritual plane on the other side. So if I were to, let's say, pass on today, if today were my time to go home, I would take the light I have today, not the light I had yesterday or the light I may have tomorrow, the light I have today, and that would determine what spiritual dimension I wind up on the other side. So yes, there's certain things we need to do. Now, that level can change. That's the idea of growth. So the spiritual potential means, okay, you may have started at this level, but you have the potential for going here. And Max Heindel really kind of described that, the Rosicrucian mystic, he described it very well. He described the path in two ways: the gentle spiral, this beautiful soul, slow spiral journey upward, which all humanity in a sense is going through, sometimes unfortunately a downward spiral if we're really messing it up. But the idea is this gentle spiral. Or if you've had the spiritual calling, you take the path of initiation, which he showed as a straight line upward, the straight and narrow. It's much steeper, but the climb is much quicker. So what we share is if you've had your awakening, that's not accidental. That's God knocking on your door. I didn't know it at the time, but those experiences I was having was the Holy Ones coming around me, that they were introducing themselves to me by their vibration. So I would never be able to, not know what that is. So as we follow that, as we build that, that's how we actually grow our soul. Now, there are many dimensions on the other side. I'm going to show a few little clips right now from the illustrations in the book because, again, these are based on actual clairvoyant. There's some compilation going on, but the plane is based on actual experiences on the other side. But we were trying to show, well, gee, is it going to be a travel log of it? There were only 8 illustrations in the book, and we decided, no, what might be a good idea is show the different stages of evolution corresponding, the turning points in evolution corresponding to different planes of consciousness. So, for example, we talk about enlightenment, right? The great goal, the Buddha attained enlightenment. Well, enlightenment isn't just something we sit down and do. It's the result of an evolutionary process. And that does correspond to a particular plane on the other side. So as we grow to that evolutionary status, as we learn to awaken those powers, those things happen. We are all mystics in the making. We're all destined for that greatness, but we're not all at the same place in the evolutionary plan. So we're not racing with each other, but we are trying to achieve ours. Your potential may be different than mine. We're brothers and sisters in light. We can support each other, but I have to reach my potential and you have to reach your potential, whatever that is. Now, the spiritual dimensions that are, shall we say, closest to Earth and the ones that are most engaged in by a lot of people. Now, I do have to also comment that Earth is a melting pot, not only of consciousness, but evolutionary levels. There are people at many different stages of their evolutionary growth here. Whether they're fully aware of it or not, that's also part of the beautiful dynamics of Earth right now, is that it's accommodating people at various evolutionary levels. But the ones that I'm focusing on in these illustrations here are, I'm sure you've heard the term, the astral planes. Astral is a Latin word. It means starry. It's the next plane from here. When we pass on from here, we're going to the astral worlds. And it's not one world there. There are different dimensions there. I won't go into all the detail right now, but I do want to show a few illustrations from that. This first one here is so there's 7 astral planes, 7 subplanes within each astral, so 49 gradations of astral matter that we're evolving through. The 4th astral plane, some of these planes we evolved through a long time ago, others may be working through right now. The 4th is so crucial because it's the pivot plane. It's sometimes called the plane of division and decision because here is where we make we have our spiritual awakening to the higher life. So, some people, I know you may be experiencing this. You've had your awakening, but maybe a loved one, even your spouse or your children or your close friends, they have not had that awakening and they don't understand what you're doing. Well, the best advice I ever received on that is love them anyway. You can't force that to happen. If I had met Barbara a year before I had my awakening, I wouldn't have recognized her as my teacher. I would say, oh, this is a very interesting person. I had a very interesting evening, but that would have been it. So the awakening is something in a sense that's happened to us. Now, for some, it happens slowly, almost even from birth. They have that. In my case, it was dramatic. It happened suddenly. Either way, what we're trying to show here is this is the divine doing this. They're recognizing, they see it's like the bud of the flower is ready to open, and then they're ready now to help and support it. So the archangelic support being shown here and the angelic, this person doesn't necessarily even aware that there's an archangel there, but they're having this profound it's not just an experience, it's a change in consciousness. And now the opportunity is to pursue that higher life. And as we know, that can be very exciting. Uh, then the fifth astral plane, now we're showing here a temple. One of the things I'm sure maybe you've already studied about is that there are education and training centers on the other side, and they're often called temples. And these temples are at different spiritual planes, or many of them. This is the temple of healing. And I will share a little bit the story here, what's being depicted. This woman is being escorted by an angel to the temple of healing. In her life on earth, she had difficulty with her father. He was cruel to her. They did not reconcile before he died, and she didn't forgive him when she died. So one of the things we always say, don't go to your grave with a grudge. Work out those differences, but she didn't. So here she is now on the other side, a good soul. She's earned the ranks of the fifth plane. Well, even on the other side, she was trying to, reconcile things with her father. So her father was at a different spiritual plane than she. He was on the fourth. So this angel took her to the fourth to try to work it out with him. And this is one of the interesting things. Even in the life of spirit, you're still basically the same person you are. You're not suddenly a saint when you cross over. And in this case, they still didn't reconcile. He was still not understanding fully what he had done. And even more shocking from her point of view, she found herself still not forgiving him. But even more so than that, she was realizing a character flaw in herself. She realized, you know what? I'm not a forgiving person. If you wrong me, I can hold a grudge for a long time. But because she was in this more elevated place, she realized this is a weakness of character. So it's not about my father at all. It's about me right now. So the angel's taking her to the healing, to the temple for a soul healing to try to learn. We all have to learn the art of forgiveness. We are never going to reach the spiritual pinnacle without having that talent. So the fifth astral plane is a lot about learning personal lessons. And Barbara, again, would give a beautiful description. While the fourth is very much like Earth in terms of scenery and things like that, the fifth plane starts, it's such a beautiful combination of the earthly, but now the beginning of the heavenly. So she's going through this right now. Now, the next one I'll show, and again, I'm going through this very quickly right now. You grow through the fifth plane, the sixth plane, there's a lot to learn there. But the top, the seventh plane, is a glorious plane. And again, as us kind of studying metaphysics and thinking about things like enlightenment and auras and clairvoyance and mysticism, a lot of that really comes into the picture when we do grow to the seventh plane, because this is the plane of enlightenment. Now, again, enlightenment happens in stages. It's not a one-stage scenario. In this depiction, the woman has reached her enlightenment. She's in front of the temple of love. And she's basically climbed the ladder through the astral planes. And in our work, again, enlightenment is a maturing process. It's like saying you've grown from a child to an adult. Many things have changed, not just one. But the most important isn't just that you have become clairvoyant and the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds has dropped, but you've awakened the God presence in you. You now know from experience that God really is. And that, of course, changes you forever. We often live by faith. We can have, again, mystical experiences. We can have travel experiences of being on the other side, but that doesn't mean we've had this experience. And once that happens, it means the soul has climbed one mountain, and now it's like you climb Mount Everest and you're celebrating what, it's a difficult journey to get there, but you made it. But now you look back and you see there's another mountain, twice as high, but you couldn't even see before. And from the astral planes, there are some other dimensions. So those of you that study theosophy have heard of the mental plane, the causal plane, things like that. There are these dimensions. We call them the interplanetary dimensions because they prepare you for the actual heaven world. In our terminology, we call the first heaven spiritual etheria. And this is and he did a beautiful job here. He really took his time. This is, by the way, these are fine art oil illustrations. They're not Photoshop or anything like that. They're hanging in the training room at the Institute. And this is almost like a mural that he did. It's showing the entry of two new souls to heaven. These are soulmates, and the ones in the gold robes, and they're being greeted by citizens of the heaven worlds. So the idea is they have reached the spiritual pinnacle after a long pilgrimage, and they're ready to begin the next stage in their whole evolutionary process. I'm sorry, I went very quickly to try to, share all this right now. But I certainly want to open up to questions or comments. Yeah.
Thanks, Dimitri. That was helpful. I read the book, and a lot of it, for those who have not yet read the book, walks through all of the planes that, in addition to the ones you discussed, but all 7 of the astral planes, and then the causal.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And then, but there's also then other parts of the book that I found maybe even more compelling in some respects, because you talk more about the journey and the fact that while there is no eternal hell, at least in the school, but there are
hellish places.
And I thought it would be good to cover that. I have to share that I had some very interesting reactions reading the book, and things that I wasn't expecting. I don't know if it was just the book or maybe it's the coming eclipse. I don't know what's going on, but it was a very interesting reaction. And I had kind of like in parts, a refueling of some very skeptical thoughts and questions, and how we can do this. And I almost wonder if the purpose of this, and once it's up on YouTube also, is that if people find this and they're questioning and they're wondering how, is any of this for real? And you say in the forward of the book that no book can prove whether there is heaven or not,
right.
but this is an accounting of Barbara's direct experience and the studies of the kingdom of light and the thousands of years of mystery tradition that goes into that. But so one thing I thought maybe I could ask, that's been, it's a question that's been kind of perplexing me for a little while, but it goes to this idea of we are our own human aspect, if you will, our personality, capable of doing all sorts of things. And in some respects, part of our growth and evolution, as is described in the book and elsewhere, is needing to have the range of experiences to grow fully.
Right.
But at the same time, as we grow, we develop the capacity to hold compassion for every person that we interact with or come to know of, because we also recognize that they are also divine souls.
Right.
So how do we reconcile living on Earth with people that can just cause harm, or actually you describe pure evil, in people, and yet also grow to the point where we can hold them with compassion as souls?
But that's the whole key, right? So and our definition of compassion is holding to the divine image of love. When we're looking at the mistakes of humanity, we are looking at actions. We're not looking at the soul. The soul is life. The soul is divine. It cannot be anything but life. It doesn't matter if you're Joseph Stalin, right? That soul is still there. That's why there's no sin past redemption. So the idea that, yes, we're going to see horrifying things, but we're supposed to see beyond that. That's our goal. I remember I was talking with Barbara one time, and it was about North Korea, and 2 million starving children. It was horrifying, right? What you were hearing. And I was asking, this is when I first started with her, well, how does God see how does see all these starving? And her immediate action from the higher was, God doesn't see starving children first. God sees his precious children. This is an experience, not who they are. Now, that doesn't mean the Holy Mother God doesn't cry tears of compassion. She does. But if we see the troubles of the world as the world, we're going to get caught in the maelstrom. Mother Teresa, she was dealing with the most people in the most destitute, dire place in their life. And she knew in the care she was given, many of them would never make it. The doctors even say you're not doing enough for them medically, but she said, no, I see the face of Christ in everyone I help. And she meant it. That was not an aphorism. That was a truth, because she's saying, I'm here to help give them their sense of dignity. So when you recognize a divine spark in me, and I recognize in you, without even saying a word, we are uplifting each other. And the hard part is, it's easy to love, if someone's loving you, you'll love them back. But it's not so easy to love when someone is showing their growly face. And the idea is we have to get past that. Because again, remember, we have free will. If we did not have that free will, we could never learn and grow. So we're going to make mistakes. Sometimes it's our mistake. Sometimes it's other people's mistake. The 91st Psalm says, 1,000 shall fall at thy side and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it won't come nigh thee if you're under the shadow of the Almighty. Meaning, we are going to see sometimes terrifying things happening, but our goal is to keep centered. This earth is being guided by God, by the divine. We are not figuring this out on our own. What we're seeing now is not the divine plan itself necessarily, but how well or not well we're realizing that plan. So we got to start thinking we own this earth. We don't, right? Dominion over the earth didn't mean we own it. It means as humans, we are the highest kingdom on earth physically, but not spiritually. The angels are higher up than we are, which means we have the most responsibility on earth. And it's very important to do that. There was you brought up such an important thing, because the doom and gloom is what holds people back from taking action. It makes them think, well, it's not worth it. You see, it's all just, the world's going to pot. Well, if I feel that way, I'm less motivated to do something about it. So yes, the goal is to stay on that. And when we hold to that divine spark, each of us have a higher self, as I'm sure you know. And as we align with that higher self, that's our guiding light. And that's how we can work through when there's a difficult day. And we also have to acknowledge all the good in the world. The problem with now today, when you're getting things, seconds fast, is what do they say in news? If it bleeds, it leads, right? It wants to focus on the dark because it gets that visceral attention from you, but it also skews the reality of what's going on. So if we watch too much of that and too fast, we start to think, well, the world is just such a dismal place. Well, it's because I'm focusing on this right now. We got to keep our mind focused on the divine, because our perspective is the world's not getting worse, it's getting better. We are at the crossroads of a much more enlightening age, but we're going through these growing pains now. Now, you brought up the word, being skeptical or not. So in the end, it doesn't matter what I have said or what I've experienced. I mean, I've had experiences of the other side that was not because of Barbara. I'm sure it's because of studying with her. So I have had verification of the reality of it. And I will share one moment with that, because it wasn't just about, oh, see, the other side is real. One experience I had was not a complicated one at all. It was just being in this beautiful, idyllic setting, but what was like nothing on earth was the God presence was in the very atmosphere. There was absolutely no question God was real. You were just in the atmosphere of it. And when I came back, I was on a high for 3 days. But then later I realized, see, they're not just trying to give me a little teaser. They're teaching me. They're saying, Dimitri, You have to bring this vibration that you experienced on that plane into this plane that you're in right now. So in this plane that is not so enlightened at the moment, can you bring in that heavenly, that godly vibration that you were experiencing? See, so we've got to bring heaven here. People think I live a good life and I'll go to heaven. You've got to you've got to be at the heavenly vibration here, and then you will get to heaven on the other side. Yogananda, the Swami Yogananda said the goal is to find God, meet God face to face in a physical body, not when you die on the other side. And he didn't mean literal physical, but he meant the God experience here. That's an exciting thing. Now, if our brother hasn't quite had it yet, your experience of having it is elevating the whole planet. And as we start to reach a critical mass level, and enough people have had their awakening, but one of the themes of the book is, if you've had your awakening and you're reading these pages, please do your best to make your spiritual growth an even higher priority in your life. Because that is not, if you say, I'll get to it next Tuesday, God, our two biggest things, our foundation is meditation, right? And the two biggest complaints are, I don't have time to meditate, or I can't concentrate when I meditate. Well, concentration, meditation is, a skill. If your mind is not that, you need to strengthen the muscle of your mind, do that. But you got to make time. I like to joke, well, if meditation is your one-on-one time with God, are you saying you don't have time for God? God, next Tuesday, I promise, it's just you and me, buddy. It doesn't work that way. You've got to put God center stage, right? And then everything else around you will fall into place.
And I had the sense when you were talking that part of what we're about now collectively is this time when, through various forms, more people are sharing something similar to what you just
Yeah.
did. And a lot of it is coming through kind of the now millions of near-death experience scenarios or experiences that are being shared and being consumed by more and more people, because I think as we grow toward what we are using the term the tipping point at IFGT, you talked about critical mass. It's a similar idea, and that the notion that at some point not everybody is going to need to have a direct experience for this to become just part of the fabric of humanity. That we
No,
get
no, no, that's unrealistic. We're not talking about an automatic age of enlightenment. No, that's not realistic. But we are talking about a fundamental shift for sure. There was a time, as I'm sure you've studied already, when the mystical was an honored place in society. If you were in a mystery school, let's say in ancient Greece, it's kind of like saying you're a Navy SEAL. You were in the top echelon, but also not everybody could do that. So we're not in that age right now. We're in a little bit more of a skeptical age or a material age. But part of what needs to happen is a reassignment of the metaphysical and the mystical in the study of human development. We've got to get that back into the fabric of society, but in a modern interpretation of it. And it's happening slowly, but it's a gradual thing. Who would have thought, Darwin's thing would just become what it is now today, and we're all just thinking we're just whatever, just lucky little biological specimens that, somehow we're able to get life. So there's a lot going on right now. And the other thing we do share is that the technological advances that are going on right now from the point of view of the higher, because that's where the inspiration is coming in, it's coming in from the higher, is to lay the groundwork for this. The more we understand the physical universe, the more demand is being required to understand the spiritual universe. So, and it's supposed to be more mature. Now we have this opportunity to have a more mature understanding of the divine than ever before. It's a golden age. We're very lucky to be here right now. Now, I do understand, and this is a tough one. You know, we may have this calling, but we band with people of like mind so that we can share ideas like this and experiences. But in our own families and our own work life, we may feel like we're a little bit a lone wolf. And there you've got to be strong and do your best to love everybody, your family, even if they're not agreeing with what you're saying. But to also find like-minded souls. Barbara used to say in the beginning of her work, the single biggest reason a person would leave the classes was at the insistence of a spouse. Oh, you're spending too much time with that Barbara. It was almost like a jealousy going on, right? There was no infidelity, but emotionally, the spouse was engaging with something the other spouse wasn't participating in. And that made them feel like they were on the outside. But if we don't band together and, thank God that we have the video now. At the Institute, we've been doing video since 2006, right? So long before the COVID era. And it has really helped to bring people together. This is, again, where technology can be enormously helpful.
Hi,
Welcome.
everyone. Hi, Dimitri.
Hi.
I have about 1,000 questions, but I'll try to narrow it
Okay.
down. Uh, First of all, I just want to say you're such a wonderful teacher, and I'm really appreciating this time with you and everyone. And I have some questions about, and I'm totally tuned in to what you're saying about the compassion now, which I find, to bring up Ken's point, that sometimes I find I have to, not I have to, but I feel compelled to not to make other people wrong, my friends in particular, but to be able to just voice that about compassion, because there's so much attack going on in
Right.
the visible world anyway that we share. So um, my question is, um, anyway, so thank you because you're reinforcing that. I
Yeah.
mean, I have to
It's
do
not
it.
always easy
Like
to
I have a
do that.
choice, right?
Yeah. It's not always, yeah.
But
Um,
don't we have to hold people accountable still for their harmful actions in in
Well,
this?
yes, but I'm not sure. Let's see what Diane's question.
Okay.
okay. What
Yeah.
I was going to ask you is, and I could get into that whole conversation, but Kingdom of Light. Um, and from a very early age, and I didn't get as deeply into everything as maybe you and Marianne, but I did kind of dabble, like Rosicrucian, Theosophy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of it my whole life.
Great.
And yeah, and Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi had a huge effect on me. So I'm interested, I'm always interested, how is it, where did the Kingdom of Light, is that, you said 4,000 years at least old. How is it received? What was the origin? How
Yeah,
did that,
that's a great boy. We could do another 2 hours on that question, but that's a great question. So, um, and I think I can get a little esoteric here because it seems like we're in a savvy group here right now. But genuine mystical teachings are not, made up, right? They're not. Look, we can devise a very clever, let's say, motivational system. I say, hey, I've invented this, and it can have value, right? It help motivate you. But when you're dealing with mystical teachings, they're called revealed, right? Now, I don't mean channeled. I don't mean like psychically channeled. That's different. All right. I mean, when you're in what we call mediatorship with the divine. All right. There's a big difference between mediumship and mediatorship. So when you're in mediatorship, you're in communion with the divine, and they're really doing the teaching. Barbara's mentor and teacher, Inez, used to say, the role of the earth-based teacher is to be the amanuensis for the holy ones until the student can reach that place for themselves. So it's really coming from the higher, right? The divine, and they have systems that they have devised. So, and there really is two very, very ancient traditions. But what's happening is one is much older than the other. And the Kingdom of Light teachings is part of a new era that's coming. The Hermetic teachings is a part of a very, very, very ancient tradition. So that was started with the Hebrew mystics, but it was not meant just for them. It was meant for the world, just like, okay, music, classical music can start in a particular place in the world, but isn't meant to be in Italy or Germany or Austria. It's meant for the world, even though it may have had a location where it began. So part of what's happening is there's a shift in what's going on of how the divine is working with us because we're growing. So it's like we've been in grade school. Now we're either ready for high school or whatever you want to call it. Different teachers are coming in for that. And that's still in an emerging state. So the key is, you said you've dabbled in things for a while. Well, I would say if you're at a time in your life now where you can get even stronger in your practice, whatever you're practicing, and really try to make an even more concerted effort. Well, how am I really, changing my life right now? How am I really doing everything I can to make this happen? You've been in the world, work, it sounds like your whole life. And now the question is, this maybe is a good time to take it to the next step.
Enlightened masters such as Yogananda and such as we, as I say, if there's an enlightened master around, I'm trying to go. But study the teachings of Siddha Yoga right now. I don't know if you're familiar, but now, and they say that, well, in terms of awakening the Kundalini, etc., that it can happen in many different ways. Obviously, you had your experiences, but they say that you need to have the Shakti, the Shaktipat, the touch, the awakening of the Shakti, the God energy from an enlightened master. And sometimes I think, well, that was just their experience, but that can't be true for all people. And so where do they fit into the scheme in terms of?
You're asking deep questions here right now. That's another 2-hour workshop. But it's a good question. Look, part of my job is to share as we have experience and know it, and you make a decision as to value or not value. Okay. We don't recommend directly focusing on the Kundalini. It is an energy that naturally evolves on its own. And quite frankly, I have seen people go basically crazy because it's like literally opening Pandora's box and they didn't know what to do with it. And it was shocking what I was experiencing. For helping others. This was in the beginning of working with Barbara. So I learned from firsthand, you don't mess with this. This is playing with fire. This was taught, but it was taught in the ashram after many years of training and in the presence of a guru. Not that the guru had the total command, but to make sure that the student was handling this correctly because it is such a sensitive energy. Now, at a certain time, there's no question we need a teacher. There is no way I could have read every book in the Library of Congress on metaphysics and not get what I got from Barbara. There is in the Hebrew mystics, they called it the oral tradition. Not that they were just describing things orally, but there is a transmission of energy because remember, a spiritual teacher, if they're a true one, they're ordained by the higher. So it's the way of connecting with the higher. Again, my example, what Inez shared, is that the earth-based teacher is kind of like a conduit for the higher, for the student, because they haven't built that bridge yet. Doesn't mean they're less valuable or less precious in God's eyes, but there's a connection that hasn't been made yet. So in that sense, at the right time, what do they say? When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. A teacher is not a god. Now one of the mistakes, and Barbara would say they've made a mistake in some of the Indian traditions, is they tend to worship their guru, thinking they're worshiping God. Don't do that. She used to say in Buddhism, don't worship me. I don't want you worshiping me. You know, if you see value in what I teach, follow the teachings. You know, so you revere the teacher because they are in this position, but we have to do, number one, our own growing. Nobody can wave a magic wand and make you enlightened. And anyone that says 5 easy steps to enlightenment, you just run the other way. It doesn't work that way, right? But at the same time, they can facilitate certain things. Just like, again, think any art. You want to be a, you know, I used to play a lot of piano. Well, I've had some great piano teachers. I learned from them things that have been very hard to learn on my own, right? They transmitted certain understandings, and it carried, you know, for me. So it's the same in metaphysics. There's a, you know, there's a time in the mystery schools they called the leader the hierophant, you know, the one that had the direct connection there. Others did too, but they were kind of the overarching leader there. It's just the way the system is taught. In any other skill, we would go train with experts or apprentice or whatever it was. It's the same with metaphysics. The only challenge is, remember, again, going back to that statement, because the mystical, we're not in a mystical age on the in terms of society right now. We are trying to re-energize that phenomena. We're trying to bring that back onto the public platform. And it is very difficult because there is a certain amount of trust, a certain amount of faith involved in something like that. But again, kind of trying back to your question, we have to do our, if I'm answering your question, we have to do our own growing. A teacher can help at the right time, but there are many things. I mean, the experience I had was not the Kundalini, for example. It wasn't that energy at all. It was a whole different energy that was coming down from above. So, but I have had some of the Kundalini experiences, but it was, again, a very gentle thing. It was a very coordinated effort, let's put it that way. You know, it is sensationalistic, so some feel like, oh my God, it felt like electricity bolted right through me. So it can be kind of, you know, a little bit alluring. And that's why Barbara would be very careful. She would say, you know, don't fall into the psychic traps, the allure of all, because the phenomena can be very alluring, but it doesn't bring you necessarily one step closer to the divine.
Right.
Yeah. So, and those things should be byproducts when people come to our class and say, oh, I saw this, I had that. And then other people say, oh, I didn't have anything. Maybe I'm not doing as well. Not at all. Not at all. And sometimes I've seen people get enamored. There's a Flower Newhouse, or the gentleman that worked with her, she was a great clairvoyant. He said, you know, there were students that wanted so badly that clairvoyant experience, they were creating counterfeit experiences because they wanted it to happen so much.
Wow.
It was hurting them, not helping them. And it was potentially opening them up to the lower influences because, unfortunately, those do exist. Yeah.
Sad. Yeah. I mean, I just to finish on that the reason I was asking about the Kundalini, you know, not about my own, and actually I did have, you know, I've had a lot of different experiences, mystical, Kundalini, you name it, but, and direct, but that's what I'm looking at, the direct to live in that established. But I just wondered about the teachers who actually say that, particularly from, you know, the East of Vedanta to traditions, that, I mean, is that even a wise thing to be saying anymore? That's all. That's why I
Be
was
saying
asking.
what? To be saying what?
To say that, well, you can't get there without a guru, but you're kind of saying, well, you know, we all need a teacher, and at some point you get
Yeah.
to a place, and then you need somebody who can take you to the next place. You know, on a very mundane level, we're tennis players. I read today, Djokovic, right, the greatest tennis player maybe that ever, and he parted ways with his coach. I'm sure he'll get somebody else. So I think,
There you
yes,
go.
thank
There you
you.
go. Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you
yeah.
very
And
much.
by the way, Vedanta, that's a beautiful tradition there, you know, from the Upanishads and Vivekananda and that kind of lineage. So that Vedanta is what, you know, it's funny, we lived in Sunland for a while. In La Crescenta, I don't know if you ever went there, Paramananda had an ashram, right? And it was following the Vedanta tradition. And it was just I mean, he was already dead by the time we went over there, but it was just a beautiful, kind of flow. And Vivekananda was one of the first to bring the Eastern traditions even before Yogananda, right? So yeah, there's a lot to study there. There's a lot to study there. But yes, the point is you're responsible for your own soul evolution. But yeah, to cap it off, of course, at the right time, definitely you need a teacher. There's just too much to, but again, you have to discern, there's a lot involved with that, right? We do a whole course on discernment to understand what's the difference between a real teacher or a phony teacher, because there are a lot of phony ones, and there's some that are deliberately, trying to mislead for personal gain. So that you have to be careful for them. Just like in any profession, there are the con people, and spirituality is definitely there. Just because you say, hey, I'm a spiritual teacher, does not make you one.
I do want to see if we just circle back to the point about certainly understand going back to this idea of finding compassion
Oh,
for
right.
everyone, but at the same time, and in part of the book, we talk about the nether worlds and places that people that fall badly off the path of evolution
Mhm.
for oneness with and eventually returning home to know yourself as part of God, I guess, is the ultimate in a more positive path. But the opposite can exist as well. And so trying to find that place where you in many respects, I think I'm learning more and more that part of our growth also is being able to absorb and live with what at one point can be paradoxical. And then as you grow, you actually see how two things that seemed inconsistent can actually exist at the same time. So in that context, can we simultaneously hold that compassion for someone, even in the face of horrible things, and not forgive them or excuse them from the consequences of the harm that they may perpetrate in a given lifetime? Can we do both
Well,
things simultaneously?
well, wait a minute, wait a minute. Please remember, forgiveness is part of love too. So the whole point is that you can forgive even the most heinous crime. If you don't do that, you'll be stuck in it. Remember, when you forgive, you're not letting the other person off the hook. You're letting yourself off the hook. All right. If I'm holding on to a grudge, I'm not climbing the spiritual ladder when I'm holding that on. There was I mean, we do a whole thing on forgiveness. I'll share one quick thing, and then I know, but it's so important. There was so many stories from, World War II in those days. But one lady, it was a famous story. You may have heard of this. She was in one of the concentration camps and she was abused, particularly by this one jailer. She survived it and she became very religious, as her way of dealing with it. But this gnawed at her for like 15 years, after it happened, after the war. And at one point, um, she's at some gathering or whatever's going on. And of all people, who does she see there? But she sees that jailer, the one that abused her in the not in the concentration camp. And she said, the minute I saw him, my first reaction was to just throttle and kill him right on the spot. That was my first reaction. But then this other came in. Well, wait a minute. You've been preaching now forgiveness. You've been, the other part of me came in there and said, no, don't do that. So she said, with every literal ounce of strength I had, I walked up to him. I looked him straight in the eye, and he knew who I was. And I said to him, I forgive you for everything you did to me. And she said, I meant every word of it.
Hmm.
And you know what she reported after that? After doing that, she said, I felt relief for the first time since it happened. So it took her 15 years of hard work to get to that place where she could really put this behind her. Now, by the laws of karma, she freed herself from being tied to him. He's going to have to work it out. There is always justice in even what appears to be an unjust world. Again, this world is run by the divine. The laws of karma are for everyone. No one gets off the hook. But if we say, I forgive you, but we haven't really done it yet. The woman that survived the Rwandan genocide saw her family butchered in front of her. She said, the hate was eating me alive. Now, she wasn't metaphysical, but somewhere she said, I had to let this go. I don't know if she was practicing forgiveness 12 hours a day, whatever it was, but she found that place of being able to say, no, it's gone. Now, if she can forgive that, we can forgive the slides done to us. I don't care, whatever they may be. Yes, that's
or
the
we,
very core thing here. This is a big subject, Kenya, you're bringing up.
right. And I think but it's also, it strikes me that that's a huge part of why we're seeing so much difficulty in the world, and the polarization and the fear that
Those are
surrounds all of
passing
it.
things. This is what I mean. Don't focus. Our goal is not, Barbara said this years ago. She said, we are at the tail end of the scorpion in age. Where's the venom in the tip of the tail? So, and she described it very beautifully. It is like an end of an age. So what's happening now is what happens if you have an infected wound, right? And you've got to heal it. Sometimes what you have to do is you have to literally lance the wound, let the pus come out, and then you can dress the wound. Well, I hate to say this, and this is probably what you're referring to, Ken. We're still at that pus releasing stage.
Yeah, yeah.
We're seeing all this coming out right now, and it's disgusting, it's horrifying. And yes, it doesn't mean we don't take action to correct it, but we also have to realize there's a bigger process going on right now. Because in ages past, all this stuff was hidden behind the scenes. We didn't even know it was happening, right? We didn't have TV to see. I mean, look at what Stalin did to his own people over 20 years. What, 20, 30 million killed? There was no TVs at that point. I don't think there were yet. They had come in the picture to see all the horrors that were going on, right? How many did Mao Zedong kill of his own people in China,
Right.
right? We're seeing horrible things, but not at that scale in this century. So I don't want to say it's been a lot worse. It has been. What, at one point, 90% of the world population was in servitude or slavery. Yes, we're definitely cannot an enlightened planet yet. There's that is if you have the Ten Commandments that has to tell you don't kill, don't steal, don't those are very basic things, right? So yes, there's a primitive side to us for sure, but that's part of the learning and the growing process. And the challenges, the more enlightened ones are in the same mix with the less enlightened. And yes, you can say it can be varied, but one last note I'll leave on here. We have that own situation in our own auric field. In our own aura, you have energies that are very beautiful and enlightened, and you have energies that are not. And we're coexisting or living with those energies now. Our job is to eliminate that unenlightened and negative and accentuate the positive. That's part of the journey. So yes, it's happening within ourselves as well as within the world. So, but the goal is focus on the goal. You focus on what you want to accomplish. Hold that ideal in your mind, even if you have not achieved it yet. And then that will be kind of the spur to help, lift you up.
If people are struggling to continue on their path to do a lot of the things that are suggested in the book, either because of overwhelms of difficult emotions or traumatic experiences or a mental illness, are there things that you recommend that we can do to kind of shift back and get back on track?
Well, as you know, in the book, we outline a whole plan of attack, right? But the foundation, I will say, is meditation and prayer.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not already meditating daily, I would say just make it, and then it's got to be really concentrated time. Oh, I meditate when I drive in the car. That's not meditation. You're meditating is you're physically still. You are not distracted by things around you and what's going on around you, and you're focusing to make a connection with the inner part of you. I meditate every day. Obviously I'm doing the classes more than once a day. And those times I don't always do it, I feel like I'm a little off center. Something's not quite where it needs to be. So I would say make your meditation a stronger part of your life, and then make it the centerpiece, and then everything. And then the other things in the book, I would recommend, of course, following. One was the education that I was doing. Healing is needed, making room for it in your life. And one of the most important, we'll keep saying this last one, but this really will be, okay, we may meditate. So we meditate with light, right? So let's say you need ask a raise at your job, and you've been chickening out doing it, right? Even though you really truly feel you deserve it. Well, in the aura, fear shows up as sort of a gray energy. Confidence shows up as a golden energy. So you may have more of the gray than the gold at that moment, because you're letting the whatever consequences of it get in your way. You can meditate with the golden energy, but you can't just meditate. You still have to go out and do it. So it's the application of the truths that you are learning that is really going to turn the key. So whatever you've learned, whatever, let's say, oh, today or yesterday, I got this beautiful inspiration. All right, and then are you really acting on it? Because truth is not truth till it lives in your heart. And it can only live in your heart through going through the experience. You cannot think your way to enlightenment. You have to go through the actual steps. And the soul learns slowly. What, right? The mystics say, in patience, you possess your soul, because it takes time to go through these things. And be patient with yourself. Be kind. Sometimes we're awfully hard on ourselves. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'll never make it. No, don't glamorize yourself, but don't belittle yourself either. Recognize you are this precious spark of life, and you're essential to the fabric of life. And you need to make a contribution that's unique to you.
That was wonderful. I think we needed that last part to.
Okay. Yeah.
So thank you, Dimitri.
All
Again,
right.
a pleasure meeting you. We're really honored and grateful for your willingness to come on and sharing all of your work. And I encourage everyone to read this and your many other books. They're treasures. So thank you so much again. And thank everyone for joining us. And to those of you watching this later, hope you get a lot out of it and are encouraged to continue on your paths as well. So thank you very much.